In the quiet heart of Dusty Hollow, where sunsets paint the earth gold and silence speaks louder than words, a lonely rancher makes one choice that changes everything. He didn't mean to fall in love. He only meant to help. But when he paid for her time, he never expected she'd cost him his heart. Can love grow again on soil watered by loss and hope? Let's find out.
Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We've got more powerful stories coming every single day, and you don't want to miss them. Now, let's begin.
The morning sun hung low over Dusty Hollow, turning the dust in the air to drifting gold. Wagons lined the road, laughter carried from the old barn, and the smell of coffee and cornbread filled the breeze. It was the town's spring charity auction, a tradition older than the church itself. Women volunteered a day of service to raise money for the orphan school, and men bid for their help, mending fences, cooking meals, tending gardens. It was all in good fun, but when Clara Whitmore stepped forward, the crowd hushed. She stood in her simple blue dress, straw hat shading her eyes, her hands clasped tight before her. The teacher everyone loved, gentle as spring rain, but not one for idle gossip or romantic talk. The auctioneer began calling bids. A few young men offered small sums, teasing, grinning. Clara smiled politely, heart fluttering with nerves. Then, from the edge of the crowd, a deep voice broke through. $20. Heads turned. Elias Danner, the reclusive rancher from Willow Creek, had spoken. His voice carried calm power, like thunder heard miles away. He hadn't attended a town event in years. The hammer fell. "Sold! To Mr. Danner!" Gasps rippled through the barnyard. Clara met his gaze, steady, unreadable, yet not unkind. Why had he come? Why her? Something in his eyes told her this wasn't about charity at all. The next morning, Clara Whitmore rode the narrow trail toward Willow Creek Ranch. The air smelled of sage and promise. She told herself this was just a day's work, nothing more. Still, her heart beat faster than her horse's trot. The ranch came into view like a memory fading back into color. Fences leaned, paint flaked, grass grew wild. Yet there was beauty there, quiet, patient, waiting. Elias Danner met her by the gate. Hat in hand, sleeves rolled, the sun catching the bronze in his hair. He looked surprised she'd actually come. "I didn't mean to make a scene yesterday," he said softly. "The auction was for charity. I just wanted to do some good." Clara smiled, steadying her voice. "Well, you paid for me, Mr. Danner. Now tell me what you'd have me do." He studied her, long enough for her to feel the weight of his silence. Then his gaze drifted to the land around them, tired but not hopeless. "Help me bring this place back to life," he said. For a moment neither moved. The wind carried the faint creak of a broken sign, the echo of something lost but not gone. Clara nodded slowly. "Then let's start with the garden." Elias smiled, barely but real. As she walked past him toward the house, he turned, watching her move through sunlight and dust, feeling something stir that he thought had died with time. If someone asked you to help them rebuild not just a home, but their heart, would you stay or protect your own? Comment what your heart would do. The soil behind Willow Creek Ranch was stubborn, dry, cracked, and hard as an old man's heart. Clara knelt in the dirt anyway, sleeves rolled, determination set in her eyes. The sun pressed heavy, but she didn't flinch. Elias watched from the fence, leaning on the post, arms folded. He wasn't used to seeing anyone touch that ground. His late wife, Lydia, had once planted roses there. They'd withered after her passing. He hadn't had the will to pull them up or start again. Clara hummed softly as she worked, breaking clumps of soil with her hands. She found a single green sprout hidden among the weeds. Gently, she freed it and replanted it near the edge of the garden, whispering, as though the plant could hear, "You just needed a little care." Something in her tone, that blend of patience and quiet faith, tugged at him. By afternoon, her dress was streaked with dirt, her hat tilted, her smile glowing like summer itself. She stood and brushed her palms together. "There," she said, satisfied. "It may not be much yet, but life has a way of surprising you." Elias said nothing, but later, when night settled and crickets sang, he couldn't sleep. He kept seeing her hands in the earth, her eyes full of light, and her words echoing in his mind. Maybe she wasn't just planting a garden. Maybe she was planting hope. Late afternoon sunlight slanted through the open barn doors, painting long golden stripes across the floor. Clara had come looking for a missing hammer, but found something else. A wooden beam carved with a single word: Lydia. The name was faint, weathered by time, yet carved deep enough to last. She traced it gently with her fingertips. The barn was silent, heavy with stories she didn't know. Behind her, a quiet voice spoke. That was her spot. Clara turned sharply. Elias stood in the doorway, his hat low, shadows cutting across his face. "She used to sit right there," he continued, nodding toward the beam. "Said the light fell just right for painting." Clara lowered her hand. "You loved her deeply." He hesitated, eyes fixed on the sunlight. "I still do. But grief doesn't fade. It just learns to live somewhere else." They stood in the stillness, the air thick with the ache of what was and what might be. Clara wanted to say something, anything, but her voice caught. Instead, she smiled softly and whispered, "Then maybe this place is ready to learn how to live again." Elias looked at her, really looked, and something in his eyes changed. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore, it was waiting. If you discovered a love someone lost, would you walk away? Or stay and help them heal? What would your heart choose? Let us know in the comments. The storm rolled in without warning, a wild, restless wind that swept across Willow Creek Ranch and turned the sky to charcoal. Clara had been gathering laundry from the line when the first raindrop fell, big as a coin. Moments later, the heavens broke open. "Get inside!" Elias shouted from the barn, his voice barely cutting through the thunder. Clara clutched the basket and ran toward him, skirts twisting, hair whipping free. Lightning split the sky as she slipped on the slick boards, but before she could fall, his arms were around her. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. Rain poured through gaps in the roof, drumming against the wood. Elias's hand lingered at her back. Her breath caught as she looked up into eyes that seemed darker now, deeper. Neither spoke. There were no words for that moment between fear and something far stronger. "I told you this roof needed mending," she whispered, trying to smile. He gave a quiet laugh, the first she'd heard from him. "Guess you were right." Outside, thunder rumbled like a distant drum, but inside, the world had narrowed to two people standing too close, drenched in something that wasn't just rain. When the storm eased, she stepped away, heart racing. He didn't stop her, but his gaze followed like a promise unspoken.
The morning after the storm, the air smelled clean, fresh, like the world had forgiven itself overnight. While Elias rode out to check the fences, Clara stayed behind to tidy the study. Dust had claimed nearly every surface, and sunlight streamed through the lace curtains like threads of gold. She found an old wooden box tucked beneath a stack of ledgers. Curiosity tugged. When she lifted the lid, a faint scent of lavender escaped, and a bundle of letters, tied neatly with a faded blue ribbon. Her heart hesitated, but the top one was unsealed. The handwriting was Elias's, strong, deliberate. A man trying to steady emotions too big for words. The letter began tenderly, "My dearest Lydia." Clara read only a few lines before guilt pricked her. They weren't hers to read. She meant to close the box, but then a smaller sheet caught her eye, unfinished, different. It began the same, but ended with a pause. If I could learn to love again, it would be with her. The ink stopped mid-sentence, as if his hand had trembled, or his courage had. Clara's breath caught. Did he mean her? She folded the letter gently, returning it to its place, but the words followed her all day, lingering like the scent of rain after thunder. If you found a letter like that, part confession, part unfinished truth, would you ask about it, or keep his secret safe? What would your heart do?
By autumn, Willow Creek Ranch had come alive again. The fences stood straight, the fields glowed gold, and laughter had quietly returned, mostly Clara's. Even the horses seemed to sense it, their restlessness replaced by calm. When the town announced the harvest fair, Clara urged Elias to come along. "It's good for the spirit," she'd said, eyes shining. He tried to resist, muttering about chores, but when she smiled that small, stubborn smile, he found himself saying, "Yes." That evening, the fairground shimmered under strings of lanterns. The air smelled of roasted corn and cinnamon pies. Music drifted from a fiddler near the barn, and couples spun on the dusty floorboards like falling leaves. Clara stood at the edge, watching, until a shadow fell beside her. Elias, hat in hand. "You plannin' to dance?" he asked quietly, "or just stand there teachin' the floor how to blush?" She laughed. The sound caught him off guard. And who would dance with a woman wearing dirt-stained boots? He offered his hand, "A man who's got the same kind." The crowd melted away as they moved together, slow and unhurried. His hand rested at her waist, hers on his shoulder, and for a fleeting moment the world felt simple again, two hearts learning to breathe in rhythm. When the music faded, their eyes lingered too long. Then Martha Green whispered something to Mayor Whitlock, and the mayor's gaze landed on Elias. His cheerful face shifted, just slightly, enough for Clara to notice. Elias stiffened. "What did he say?" she asked softly. "Nothing," he muttered, stepping back. "Just old business." But the way he looked toward the horizon said otherwise. The morning after the harvest fair was strangely still. The sky hung gray over Willow Creek, and even the birds seemed to wait for something to happen. Clara arrived at the ranch early, carrying a basket of bread from the orphan school. But when she reached the porch, she found Martha Green already there, waiting. Martha's face was kind, but serious. "Clara, I thought you should know. The mayor offered Elias a deal yesterday, a good one. He wants Elias to sell part of the ranch and move east, start over." Clara blinked.
Move? Martha nodded. He hasn't told you? Her heart sank. No, he hadn't, and that silence said more than any words could. That evening, when Elias returned from town, Clara met him by the corral. "Is it true?" she asked, voice trembling slightly. "You're leaving?" He sighed, eyes fixed on the mountains. "It's just talk for now. The deal could give me a fresh start, new land, new life, away from the ghosts here." She stared at him, her pulse quickening. "And what about this place? What about what we've built?" His gaze met hers, gentle but uncertain. "That's what I don't know anymore." The wind tugged at her hair as silence fell between them. She wanted to ask if he'd meant the words in that unfinished letter. She wanted to beg him to stay, but all she managed was a whisper. "Maybe some ghosts aren't meant to be left behind." He didn't answer. "If you were Elias, would you take the chance to start over or stay and risk your heart again? What would you choose?" 3 days passed, and Elias Danner never mentioned the offer again. He worked from dawn until the stars came out, his silence louder than any storm. Clara tried to stay hopeful, but each word unspoken between them built a wall she couldn't climb. One morning, she woke before sunrise and stood on the porch, watching mist curl across the fields. The ranch looked peaceful now, alive again. Yet something inside her felt still, like a page that would never turn. Martha had once told her, "Sometimes love isn't about holding on, dear. Sometimes it's about letting go before you're forgotten." Clara packed her things quietly. A few dresses, her books, the letter he'd never finished, folded carefully in her pocket. She left a note on the table, the ink trembling beneath her hand. "Elias, you once asked me to help you bring this place back to life. I think it's time you let it live without me. Clara." She saddled her horse and rode toward Dusty Hollow, the morning light chasing her shadow across the plains. When Elias returned, he saw the empty porch first, then the note. He read it twice before setting it down with shaking hands. Outside, the wind moved through the fields like a sigh. He didn't call after her, didn't ride to stop her. But his heart, that stubborn, silent heart, had finally learned what losing love truly meant. That night, he didn't light a lantern. He sat in darkness, whispering her name to the empty air. A week passed before Elias Danner rode into Dusty Hollow again. The town looked the same, yet everything felt different. He found Clara at the orphan schoolyard, surrounded by laughter, children chasing sunlight while she read aloud beneath the oak tree. For a moment, he simply watched. Her voice carried soft over the breeze, her smile brighter than any dawn he'd seen in years. Something inside him shifted, not suddenly, but like ice finally melting after a long winter. When the children ran off for lunch, she noticed him standing there. Her eyes widened, but she didn't speak. He removed his hat slowly. "I came to return something," he said. Clara's voice trembled. "And what might that be?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver ring, tarnished, simple, once meant for another woman. "I sold half my land," he said, steady but soft. "Not to start over somewhere new, but to start right here, with you." Her breath caught. The schoolyard went still. "I don't want a new life, Clara," he whispered. "I want the one that found me when I'd forgotten how to live." Tears shimmered in her eyes, and for the first time she didn't hide them. "Do you believe love can truly heal a heart once broken? Or does it only teach us to live with the scars? Tell us what your heart believes. The evening sun bathed Willow Creek Ranch in a golden haze. Wildflowers swayed along the fence line, and the sound of crickets hummed beneath the open sky. The townsfolk had gathered quietly, not for spectacle, but for love that had found its way home. There was no church bell, no polished aisle, just a simple arch woven from willow branches, and Clara Whitmore standing beneath it in a soft cream dress that fluttered in the breeze. Her hands trembled slightly, but her smile didn't. Elias Danner approached slowly, hat in hand, his boots stirring the dust. The crowd seemed to fade as he reached her. For a moment, they just looked at each other, two souls who'd weathered loss, silence, and the long road back to light. The sheriff spoke the words, gentle and brief, but the vows came from their hearts. "I once asked you to help me bring this place back to life," Elias said, his voice low, rough with emotion. "You did that, and more. You brought me back." Clara's eyes shimmered. "You paid for me that day, Elias," she whispered, smiling through her tears. "But you never owed me a thing. You just had to believe you were worth loving again." A hush fell as the sun dipped behind the hills, painting everything in gold. Elias took her hand and kissed it, reverently, tenderly. "You paid for me. Now love me," she murmured. "I already do," he said. Applause rose softly, mingled with laughter and tears. As they turned toward the fading light, the ranch glowed, alive again, just as they were. A full year passed, and Willow Creek Ranch no longer looked like a place haunted by loss. It breathed with laughter, purpose, and peace. The fences gleamed new. The garden overflowed with color, and a hand-carved sign hung proudly at the gate, the Ranch of Second Chances. Clara Danner knelt beside a row of bright marigolds, teaching Tommy and Elsie how to plant seedlings without breaking their roots. Their giggles danced through the warm air. Not far away, Elias was repairing the corral, humming a tune the children had taught him. When he finished, he walked toward her, dust on his boots, sunlight in his eyes. "You've turned this place into a school," he said, glancing around at the children reading near the porch. "Guess I'll never have a quiet day again." Clara smiled. Quiet never healed anyone. He chuckled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "No, I suppose it didn't." They stood together, watching the little ones chase each other through the tall grass. Orphans who now had a home, a family, a chance. Clara leaned her head against his chest. "You know," she whispered, "when I first came here, all I saw was broken land. But now I see love growing everywhere." Elias kissed the top of her head. "That's because you planted it, Clara." The wind stirred, carrying laughter across the fields. The sun slipped low, painting the sky in honey and rose. At last, the rancher who'd once lost everything had found far more than he ever dreamed. Not just a wife, but a forever. Years later, the ranch still stood. White fences, golden fields, laughter drifting with the wind. Elias and Clara Danner sat on the porch at sunset, hands entwined, hearts quiet. He smiled softly. "I thought I paid for one day, Clara." She looked at him, eyes warm as the dusk. "No, Elias, you paid for love, and it stayed." The wind swept through the fields, carrying their story across the plains, and somewhere in that whisper, love
promise to never fade.
Thank you for watching till the end. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. We'll be dropping brand new powerful stories every single day. See you on the next one.